Representative Lundeen just passed some important legislation today that the governor will be signing that has to do with getting a better handle on children and the sex trafficking that we're seeing in our state. NACO consistently supports those federal anti-trafficking legislative measures that support victims. And for example, we advocate for increased U.S. Department of Justice, or DOJ, and other federal funding for grants for both state and local governments to help us combat child sex trafficking and assist the victims, including funding for victim-centered services, law enforcement, training, and multi-agency collaborations. We found that sex trafficking involving children age 18 and younger is a growing problem. And you're going to hear a little bit about that from our panelists that are going to speak after the movie. But especially in large urban counties. And while we don't see it, it's happening even right here in El Paso County and Colorado Springs. But areas in big urban counties such as Los Angeles County, California, and Chicago, which is Cook County, Illinois, which the movie tonight features, are those that are some really big counties that really suffer from this particular really epidemic as we look at what's happening to our kids and to our communities. LA County Supervisor Don Knabe has been a champion for local efforts. I know Don personally, and at our NACO annual conference, which we held in Los Angeles County in Long Beach, California, coming up in July, it's going to feature actually a service project that will support victims of human trafficking. Our goal tonight is really to raise awareness in our community here about the problem in El Paso and Pueblo counties. We're about to see the documentary film Dreamcatcher, which takes us into the hidden world of prostitution and sex trafficking. Did you know that the average age is 12 for children who get recruited into the sex trade? 12 years old. Would we ever think that that would be the case? Since this film focuses on inner city Chicago, you may be thinking that since our communities are not similar, that we don't have human trafficking problems. And I want you to think again about that. Human trafficking is not confined to one aspect of one area of El Paso County. Human trafficking happening here to kids in our neighborhoods and is happening to kids in our neighborhoods and is being fueled by strong demand from all sections of our community. Sex trafficking is an issue from 11-year-olds on up to people in their late 60s. It affects all races, all ages, all socioeconomic situations. There are no standard traffickers, consumers, or victims. The more people we can make aware of this issue and call Crime Stoppers, 719-634-STOP, to tell local law enforcement when they see something suspicious, the better we're going to be able to keep our county safe and secure. Sergeant Craig Simpson, who is with our local law enforcement, will provide in just a moment some local perspective on what human trafficking looks like in our area right here in El Paso County. And then we're going to watch the film, and then we're going to open up some dialogue for any questions you would ask of some very specific panelists who are very well educated and know a lot about this issue. Dave, do you have some points that you wanted me to talk about quickly? And then we'll...
I just want to let you know that it's timely tonight.
Yeah, tonight's meeting is particularly timely. Thank you, Dave Rose, our Public Information Officer from El Paso County. El Paso County Representative Paul Lundeen just called a few minutes ago, and he wanted to be here tonight, but he's up at the state capitol working on legislation. Things are happening up there at the legislature, and he can't get away from Denver. But he wanted me to tell you that House Bill 1224 is scheduled to be signed by Governor Hickenlooper tomorrow afternoon in Denver. This bill is important because it changes the law to specifically designate minors who are involved in human trafficking as victims of child abuse, and therefore making them eligible for a number of rehabilitation services and other resources available to victims of child abuse through the Department of Human Services. So this is an important change in our state law that will give us police officers and deputies another resource when they're working to rescue young victims of human trafficking. So we'll send a message to Representative Lundeen. I did see him last weekend, and he did specifically tell me he couldn't make it tonight, but we'll send him our thanks to let him know that we appreciate his service. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Craig Simpson, who is going to provide local perspective on human trafficking here in El Paso County, and then we're going to see the movie. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Craig Simpson. I run the Human Trafficking Unit for the Colorado Springs Police Department, housed in our Metro Vice Narcotics and Intelligence Division. Our unit's been around for approximately 2 years now. It's comprised of myself as well as 2 detectives. I kind of want to start by giving you all a general idea of what we mean when we talk about human trafficking. Human trafficking is a very broad umbrella term that encompasses labor trafficking, it encompasses organ trafficking, it also encompasses taking people over international borders, things like that. But the largest portion of human trafficking is sex trafficking. 79% of all human trafficking is sex trafficking. That's a global number there. Globally, human trafficking is the #2 illicit crime being committed, right behind the illegal drug trade. It's actually tied with the illegal arms trade. Human trafficking is actually gaining on the drug trade in an effort to overtake that #1 spot to be the most frequently committed illicit crime in the world. So for our unit, we do focus on the sex trafficking aspect, and even more specifically, we focus on juvenile sex trafficking. Because it's here, folks. It's in our neighborhood, it's in our community. It's our kids, it could be somebody standing right in front of you in line at the Walmart or the grocery store that's involved. Like the Commissioner said, it cuts across all gender lines, racial lines, socioeconomic lines, sexual orientation lines. It does not discriminate. Anybody can be involved as a trafficker, as a victim, or as a consumer. And we see this throughout our investigations. In the just over 2 years that we've been in existence, we've rescued 38 juveniles, 68 adults. We've arrested 26 traffickers, and we've arrested 56 consumers, sex crimes. Thank you all. And I'm going to tell you that we were very surprised as a unit because we were kind of formed with the idea of getting a hold of what is the nature and scope of human trafficking, sex trafficking here in Colorado Springs, because it's easy to look at our streets and look at what's going on in our communities and go, it really doesn't happen here. Well, it's moved off of the street corners and onto the internet. And that's why we don't see it as often. That's why it's easy to not see it and not be aware of it and think that it doesn't happen there. Another very common misconception that we see that this film is really going to break down for you guys is this idea that sex trafficking, human trafficking, prostitution, all interrelated, that it's a victimless crime. And that is absolutely not the case. A lot of times when we talk about human trafficking, people think of that movie Taken, where they think of the people who are snatched off the streets and forced into the sex industry. And here locally, it's much more subversive and actually much more sinister than that. Because what happens is our victims get tricked, manipulated, coerced into believing that this is their only option. That somebody's helping them out by getting them involved in this to make some money. And a lot of times our victims don't really even understand that they're victims right away. Because that brainwashing, that manipulation, that coercion is so successful, it's filling a void in those people that they really believe that this is their opportunity to have a different way of life or a better way of life or have that void filled within them somehow. So they become participants in this, which makes it very difficult to investigate. Because for them to give up to us who their trafficker is, it's like asking them to give up who their father or their brother or their uncle, their family member, the person who loves them when nobody else does. It's asking them to give up that person. So it's a very interesting crime. It's a very subversive. It exists just below the surface where if you don't look for it, you're going to miss it. And I'm so pleased to see so many of you here because this film is going to open your eyes and you're going to start being able to recognize some of the signs and symptoms. Like the Commissioner said, this film does follow a survivor in inner city Chicago as she interacts with her community. But don't be fooled into thinking that the community that this woman is working in is the only problem area within Chicago, or that it's the only problem area in the country. Here, like I said, it cuts across every border line that you can think of. It is everywhere. So this movie does a great job of exposing it, of getting us involved in some discussion. And I think that after the movie, when we do the question and answer panel, I hope that you guys have plenty of questions for us, because I think we're really going to be able to answer a lot of questions and get some good discussions going based on this film. Okay? That being said, I'll be done. We'll go to it. Thank you, guys.
I'd like to call our panelists up now to have a seat up here, and then we'd like to see if we have questions for you all from the audience. And we have a couple of microphones, one here and one there. If you could, and then if there's someone who wants to answer that, they will indicate that they can answer that. These are the panel members up here. And they can, why don't I go through and you can just quickly introduce yourself so that everyone knows who you are. So we'll start down here at the bottom.
Hi, I'm Roger Patrizia with the Human Trafficking Task Force of Southern Colorado. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Herrera, and I'm the clinic manager at the Paso County Health Department, and I oversee the Family Planning Clinic, the STD Clinic, and the Adolescent Pregnancy Prevention Program.
I'm Maddie Dennis. I'm the Victim Advocacy Coordinator for the Colorado Springs Police Department.
I'm Shannon Gerhart, and I'm a Chief Deputy District Attorney.
Brenda Heimbach with El Paso County Public Health.
Jenny Hansen with Department of Human Services.
Tammy Gulia, I'm the Sergeant of the Special Victims Unit for the El Paso County Sheriff's Office.
And Craig Simpson, I'm the Sergeant for the Human Trafficking Unit at Colorado Springs Police Department.
And I also want to mention that our District Attorney, Dan May, is up here on the right. He allowed Shannon to be here tonight, so we appreciate that. Uh-oh. Now I made you nervous, huh? So do we have questions from the audience?
After watching the film, I want to know, at least specifically, what are we doing to intervene into the internet solicitation? I mean, I see on the film, naturally, you know, that was that person to person where they meet these women. What do we do? How do we address the internet problem? How are we reaching those people?
Sure. Our unit is working internet cases. We work tips that we get from the community, that we get from patrol officers, from the Sheriff's Office, the Springs Police Department, other agencies. And when we get those tips, it could even be from an organization like NECMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, will give us tips. We will look on the internet to try to locate that person. We find that person, a missing child or somebody who's being exploited. We set up some means of contacting that person so that we can intervene on that person's behalf, get them into our custody, and once we have them, then we turn it over to Maddie Dennis with our Victim Advocacy Unit, and she's the one who does all the placement, the treatment centers, all those kinds of things. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach that we use to first identify, locate the person, and then once that happens, it goes to our Victim Advocacy Unit.
I heard the statistics that were given earlier.
Right.
So based on that and the length of time, based on the length of time, what has been the rate of success?
It depends on how you define success, really. You know, when we're looking at how many girls or how many victims do we contact that we offer services to that get out of the life and stay out of the life, unfortunately, the rate of recidivism is very high. A lot of these victims go back to the life at some point, so it takes multiple times contacting the same person, offering services, doing those things in order for them to get out. If we define success by those contacts and the offering of services and the acceptance of services to at least start working down that path, I'd say we're very successful.
And one other thing I just want to ask. What resources besides NACO, what resources are available to those that you do reach?
I'll throw that to Marty Dennis there. She can talk about those resources best.
Thank you for that question. I think right now resources among the state still seem to be somewhat scarce for this population. So for our younger victims under the age of 18, we partner a lot with Department of Human Services. If they're able to open a case, then they look at placing them at different types of levels of treatment. There's not a lot of places that specialize in the human trafficking. We look for a lot of trauma-informed agencies that can help this group of victims. For the older victims, the 18 and older adults, what we really look at is what they want at the time. We try to meet them where they are. So like you saw in the film, a lot of them have issues with needing housing, needing jobs, needing education, and so we work with a variety of community partners to see if we can help them with those. So it's case by case, and a lot of times, like Sergeant Simpson said, if the person is not ready yet, and sometimes they're not, and that's okay, then we look at what other needs they might have. For instance, maybe they need an ID, or maybe they need to get a medical check. They're not ready to get out of the life, so we can facilitate that and help them get an ID or get, to a doctor. But it's just case by case.
My colleague and I are co-directors of the Office of Child and Youth Protection for the Catholic Diocese of Colorado Springs. So we do a lot of screening and training of any adults who are going to work with kids. What could you tell us to be able to tell them to look for in this area of trafficking? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish a large neighborhood watch, if you will. The more people who know what to look for, the less likely these guys will be successful. So what should we be telling them to look for? And then what should we be telling them to do if they see something that's off? Thank you.
Good question.
Our influx of cases is actually things that you don't see. A lot of the cases that we're getting in at the Sheriff's Office is starting on the internet. These kids are carrying around what I call a supercomputer in their pocket, and they have applications that they're chatting with these people online, and to a parent, it looks like a calculator app. So that's our problem right now. I have 3 cases this week of just that. So what these predators do is they start chatting with these kids online. It starts there, and they start grooming them. And once they're groomed, do this for me, take this picture, do this sexual act, and then it goes from there. Then the extortion starts, and if you don't do this for me, I am going to post the last picture you did for me online. And that is exactly what's happening. And so I would tell people to look at what you don't look at. Have your kid leave their door open. Check their phone. Don't just check Facebook. Check the calculator. Check the weather app. It's pretty in depth. It's really, really scary. So.
Hi, I'm Julia Tangway. I'm a medical student from Rocky Vista University in Parker, and my question is in regards to what education and outreach are you doing with schools to intervene and to help?
I'll start real quick. Some of my detectives have started a sexting class. It goes into those applications, the predators online, stuff like that. We just did it at several school districts. So that is out there if people are willing to have us come.
And then what we do in our efforts is we talk to our school resource officers, we educate them on the issues and have them take it out. Obviously with a 2 detective and 1 sergeant unit, we're doing a lot of investigations. So we rely on the school resource officers to take that out to the schools. There are some independent programs that will go to the schools and talk about things that are age appropriate for middle schoolers talking about internet safety and things like that, on up to the high schoolers where they're actually talking about sex trafficking and things like that. So those programs are out there.
So we work with not only the students, but the teachers, coaches, anybody on up that works with youth. And our messaging is to youth is, instead of just going out and doing the puberty talk and the birds and the bees talk, is we've incorporated a coercion class and a consent component into that. And so we're teaching them, even at our puberty level at the 5th grade, when we get, we're able to get into those kiddos, is that it's your body, and we teach them that messaging that it's not right for somebody to do things that's not appropriate, and teach them those healthy relationships and those boundaries and how to speak out. And then as far as our adults, for the teachers and coaches and counselors and that component, we teach them as somebody approaches you what to do and how to respond to that youth, and then how to direct them into services that can better help them or direct them into us so that we can get them taken care of.
My name is Carolyn Kolaski, and I'm with the El Paso County Public Health. I know that this is a multifaceted problem and that it takes a lot of different angles for us to approach this problem in order to even attack just a small bit of it. But to put so much responsibility on children to report is, I think it's unreasonable. We're hopeful that they're going to report abuse, but personally, I suffered abuse and I know that children don't, and I know why they don't. My question is, it's about our laws. There are perpetrators out there, and we've seen from the victim side what they go through. But we wouldn't have victims if we didn't have the perpetrators. And we tend to allow them to continue in their behavior. I have personally seen at stores, girls in parking lots, in trucks, walking to trucks with Johns. Now, if I see that, why don't our police see it? And what can they do about it? Why aren't they doing more to stop it? I mean, it's happening over and over and over again, and I witness it, I see it, I know what it is. But I don't have the power to stop it. I don't have a badge. I don't have a gun. If I had a gun, I'd probably be dangerous. What's the statute of limitations? There's a case on television right now about, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was 3rd in line to the presidency. You know who I'm talking about? What? Yeah, Astor. Yeah, Dennis Astor. 3rd in line to the presidency, and he was a child molester. But if the child didn't report within 3 years the abuse, then the statute of limitations ran out. So he is not going to be charged for any of the abuse that he did, that we know about. They're trying to get him on something else. I think it's a shame that we as a society are letting people who renege on their student loan debt go to jail 20 years later. But here's a man who has raped children, and he's getting away with it. So what are Colorado laws? Thank you.
There's a lot of important comments in that, and I appreciate the question. I think that the short and simple of it is, when you're talking about statute of limitations, we're pretty fortunate in Colorado. When you talk about 18 months and things like that, that's with the misdemeanors. But on our felonies, there is no statute of limitations for crimes like sex on children. So I think that's a step in the right direction. I think that our Colorado Springs Police Department and El Paso County Sheriff's Office is doing a ton to address this issue. We are collaborating every day with, I see Miss Percy here, DHS, I see everybody, Roger with the Human Trafficking Task Force. We are on top of it. We're trying every day new tactics. In my office, I want to talk about our diversion program. And that's something that I collaborated with again, all of our community partners. But basically, we saw in our office a correlation between, and the video laid it out really well, is the misdemeanor prostitutes, which, you know, officers go out on a sting, they will write the prostitute for prostitution, right? At the time, she may be the only one there. Well, we saw a correlation with that woman and the human trafficking unit, the special victims unit. So in those cases where she's the victim and she's being trafficked, she's also being written a ticket for prostitution. So what we have tried to do, and I would say we're moving along really well, is take those cases, those prostitution cases, and it's a voluntary program, and we take more of a victim approach towards those participants in our program. And Craig's team points them out for me. We watch them come in. Again, like I said, it's voluntary, but we say, do you want to participate in this diversion program? It's a 4-session program. We've included the Women's Resource Agency. Debbie Manzanares from the Human Trafficking Unit facilitates it, but it's all based on a needs assessment. And we talk to the women and one male. We've done 3 programs. We have about 15 graduates, 14 women, 1 male. And we ask them, what do you need? How can we help you? How can we? I know in 4 sessions we're not going to be able to barely scratch the surface because you see what what people go through. But when we talk to them about, you've never had a physical, then we will get that worked out. We are partners with the Dream Center, and they offer free physicals for women. We've had several candidates have dentist work. We can have tattoos removed. We help them write resumes. Whatever the needs assessment and what they want out of the program is what gears us for them. We have SANE nurses come from Memorial and talk about all of the health consequences. We have counselors. And then, like I said, the last session is kind of a resource fair where everyone from DHS to the Women's Resource Agency to anybody we can think of comes to this resource fair. We talk about how you can get help, whether that's through child custody or child support, things like that. But it's one positive that I think sometimes is overlooked is we are looking at those cases in more of a victim light and trying to give women mainly resources and let them know at the end of the day, at the end of that 4th session, I just want them to know that Colorado Springs cares. And we're not there to just write a ticket and get our conviction and move on. And I think it's been really successful so far.
You're absolutely right. And that's why we do investigate the perpetrators, the consumers, the sex buyers. As I said, we've arrested 56 of them in the last 2 years, and 26 of the traffickers themselves, the pimps, the people who are after this. So it takes extensive investigation to get to that level, to get to the pimps, the traffickers. But we do work towards that end because we're trying to work every single angle of this. For the victims, we'd like to see them get services and get some resources to get out of the life. For the consumers, we'd like to see them engage in voluntary compliance with the law to stop being consumers of the sex industry. And for the traffickers, quite frankly, I want to see the most vigorous prosecution we can get for those guys and send a message through that community that Colorado Springs does not tolerate the consumer sex industry. So we're trying from every angle.
I'm Serena Zamora. I'm an ordinary high school student. I'm in the 11th grade, and I have a history class where I write these editorials. And for this editorial before, I made one on human trafficking. At the time, I was living in Texas, and I always went to this a coffee shop called The Second Cup, and it was based off of human trafficking incidents and helped women get out of human trafficking. And I learned that Houston is the hot spot for all human trafficking beyond 620 and every highway that I lived between. And for that being, I realized that it's an international port. And I want to know what you're doing about that. because internationally, people are being sold all over the place, and we need to know where they're going. We need to know if they're going to be okay. And I'm concerned about women who are within the human trafficking means, because in the neighborhood that I lived in, anything could happen. I was particularly one of the safe ones because I just kept that way. And every day whenever I went to that coffee shop, I always looked on the wall, and on the wall they had statistics on what had happened in human trafficking, and I noticed that 70% of all human traffickers that are involved are women, and most of them are children, and it's mainly in the hotspot area of Houston, which, by the way, most people, in 26 million people, are also in Houston. That's how many people are being trafficked in the world. So I want to know, what internationally are you doing about the human trafficking that's happening all around this place?
Quite frankly, we can't reach internationally. That's beyond the scope of our powers. So we basically can deal with El Paso County and Teller County. We do have cases that have gone across state lines, and in that case, we need to get federal partners like the FBI involved in those kinds of cases. Internationally, we're really more concerned with what's happening here in our community. Not to say that we're not aware and appreciate what's going on in other places, but it's just beyond the extent. I know the Southern Colorado Human Trafficking Task Force talks about international issues a bit, so I don't know, Roger, if you wanted to weigh in on that.
Great questions. Thanks for your knowledge on this topic and your heart for this topic. We focus here in Southern Colorado, but we also study the issue, and I can assure you that ever since the Trafficking and Victims Protection Act went into place less than 20 years ago, anybody who's trafficked into the United States, there is now protection rights for the victims, for the survivors of human trafficking, and the prosecution and the legislation to have stricter prosecution for them is in place. So when they're trafficked into the United States from other countries, again, the victims, which we call survivors once they're out of that, there is some assistance for them, some services available, and the traffickers face felony charges when they're trafficked into the United States. But there are organizations all over the world that are doing great work in other countries. And countries, the Asian countries where tourism is prevalent and there's red light districts, there's been pressures put on those nations to start to control and patrol those red light districts, and it's affecting their tourism. So now countries like Thailand and Cambodia, where perpetrators know they can go there and find little girls and little boys readily available. There's pressure now put on those nations to clean that up, or they get a bad travel rating, and that affects their industry. So there is a lot of good work being done internationally. Everyone here, our focus is locally, but Human Trafficking Task Force Southern Colorado, we do collaborate with international organizations that are doing great work out there. So Houston is a hot spot, but so is Atlanta, and so is Denver. There are many cities, any big city. We saw what was going on in Chicago. So all the big cities have this problem, but it's right here in our neighborhoods too. Okay, so I would just generally say we are a group of citizens, we're volunteers, we call ourselves concerned citizens, and we've been in this battle for 8 or 9 years, and I'm proud of what's happening here in El Paso County with our Colorado Springs Police Department, the work that they're doing. We were an F rating as a state in Colorado just 3 years ago, and the organizations that rate the states, we now have a top rating, because there's been stronger legislation that's been passed. So our legislators are aware of this. Our law enforcement is doing a better job of working with the girls that were once considered prostitutes and interviewing and developing their trust. The victim specialists and advocates are doing a fantastic job. So I'm really pleased with the effort that's being done. We've got a lot of work to do to continue to make progress in such a second largest illegal crime industry in the world. But the battle is on, and there's some fantastic, passionate, dedicated, hardworking people that we are pleased as citizens just to collaborate with. So great question, but there are organizations that are fighting it internationally.
And one of the things I wanted to point out too is that here I know in El Paso County, we've been working with the state legislature, just like Representative Lundine's legislation, Representative Carver, the district attorney's office, the sheriff's office, the neighborhoods, and massage therapists worked on some changes to the law with the Department of Regulatory agencies to create the ability for some of these massage parlors that are not necessarily massage therapists to be able to allow law enforcement more ability to inspect and give us potentially, as the regulations are written this year, to regulate that more so that there is more accountability. And so legislatively, I know that all of our law enforcement, all of our agencies here, from Human Services to Public Health, are all monitoring some of that. And we do what we can from the state level. Thank you very much for your question. We have probably time for about one more question, so I'll call on you.
Good evening. It's more like 3 in 1. My first question is, how long has this task force been in existence? Number 2, has there been an increase since the legalization of marijuana? Have you seen an increase in trafficking? And number 3, basically, on the average, how many traffickers do you actually take into the system?
You may be talking law enforcement task force. Sometimes they get that name. We are a task force of volunteers, a nonprofit organization, NGO, that's been around for 8 years now. But I think the other parts of your question would be better answered by law enforcement that's here.
Who would like to take on the statistics? And
Sure.
Yeah, just statistics.
So for us, we have been in existence since January of 2014, so just a little over 2 years. And then, sorry, you're going to have to refresh my memory some of those other parts.
Have there been an increase
since
marijuana?
marijuana?
We have noticed an increase. I don't know how much of a correlation there is there. I do know that we have seen traffickers, victims coming from out of state, and when we ask them what brought them to Colorado, it's typically marijuana. You know, there's great weed here in Colorado, so they tend to come for that. So there is that component. We have noticed a rise since the legalization, but I don't know what the correlation directly there is. And then lastly, you're asking about how many traffickers. You're talking about the actual pimps.
How many come through the El Paso County system? You know, whether they're there, you know, once they get picked up, on the average, on a monthly basis, about how many people come through that system? 5, 10, 1, 2?
Well, typically we're averaging about 1 a month that we're putting into the system. What happens with the case, where it goes once that case is started and initiated, that kind of varies from case to case, so it's kind of hard to say typically what happens to those, but we do average about 1 trafficker, one perpetrator a month for the pimps.
Okay. Thank you. So we're really almost at our time here. I wanted to call back on the panelists to kind of share any closing thoughts for you on what you can do. I don't know if, Roger, you'd like to address that, and then if there's any other comments from any of the other panelists before we wrap this up so we can be done by 8 o'clock.
Okay, I'll be brief and I'll pass this along. But thank you for being here. I think education and awareness is key. We go around the community, we try to talk to schools, any organization that will invite us to talk about human trafficking and bring them education is a focus for us. But then for you who are here, once you have education and knowledge, if we don't apply it, it really doesn't do us any good. So you have to ask yourselves, what are you going to do about it? And there's a lot you can do. So I have information with me if you want to know. Our website and our meetings are open to the public, so we invite you to do that, and or join some organization, be involved in some way. Don't just know about this and not do something about it. There is a great movement and there's a great push. Colorado's made a lot of progress, but we invite your support.
Okay. Daisy, Marty?
I guess really briefly, I just want to say that this movie really highlighted the vulnerabilities that we see when we're working with our victims. They all struggle with a lot of low self-worth, and they feel that they're only worth what they can make. And they have very strong ties to their traffickers and to this life. And so our hope is, in all of our work, is to show them something different, even if it's for a little bit, even if it's planting seeds. And so this work has been very rewarding in the sense where we are working with so many of these victims that are extremely resilient in the lifestyle, in this life that they're living. So, thanks.
Thank you for being here, and I would just add that the District Attorney's Office takes these cases very seriously. Roger talked about some of the recent legislation, as well as the Commissioner. These are, when we get a perpetrator and we get a prosecutable case, these are no-deal cases. These are high-level felonies, and people go to prison. And we take that seriously. And so I talked from a victim perspective earlier with our diversion program, but no, when these cases go into our special victims unit, the special victims unit is made up of the cream of the crop for DAs. And they are going after these perpetrators, and they're going to prison for a long time. So I would just add on that note. Thank you.
Thanks.
One of the things I appreciated about the film was this very non-judgmental and persistent approach, and I think that's really helpful when we're interacting with folks, trying to get them in for the kind of care they need, medical care most certainly, but in addition to that, these are folks that have experienced a great deal. They're not going to get better in a couple of counseling sessions. They need a tremendous amount of support and empathy. Some of the things that are done more at the turning off the faucet versus the mopping up the floor end of things can be working with folks to do a better job at parenting and to be more aware of what's going on with their children. And then as the children grow up, trying to be there, even as a community, to be incredibly supportive and aware. And that's probably going to be a longer term solution to this issue.
Jenny, anything?
Hi, thank you for having me. I just want to empower all of you to start looking for what is not right in front of you. Start checking their cell phones. If your kid's behavior has changed, they start isolating themselves, you probably need to ask some questions or invite that conversation and teach them what you've learned here tonight. Thank you.
And then the last thing that I'll add is I think hopefully you all have a greater awareness for human trafficking as an issue, some of the things that you may be seeing. If you do see the girl walk into the car with a John, I want you to feel empowered to let us know because we want that information. We want to investigate those cases. So 634-STOP, Crime Stoppers, is a great number to call to give that information. You can give it anonymously. You can also call CSPD Dispatch at 444-7000 and provide that information there as well. But the more information we get, the more involvement we get from the community, as was said earlier, the greater the potential is that people are going to start seeing these people in this triangle of this commercial sex industry are going to start seeing that this is not a safe place to conduct their business, and they should be taking that elsewhere or get prosecuted and go to jail. So with that, I'll end it. Thank you very much.
So thank you all for coming tonight. I mean, I know you probably had a lot of things to do on an evening, but it shows you're caring for our community. So as much as I thank the panelists here for their expertise and their advice, I thank you for coming tonight. Let's bring this issue out of the shadows and into the light so that people in our community are more proactive and we can help stop it before it starts. Let's give them all a hand of applause. And to El Paso County Public Health as well, and all of the agencies that participated tonight for their help in promoting this effort. We can make a difference one person at a time. Thank you so much.